It is 18,000 years ago. The last glacial maximum is drawing to a close. For thousands of years, the British Isles have been entombed beneath ice sheets more than a mile thick. This is a world of absolute inhospitability, a frozen wasteland where survival is impossible. But now, subtle changes begin to unfold. As Earth's orbital cycles shift and the sun's warmth slowly returns, the great ice sheets start to weaken. Glaciers fracture and retreat, releasing torrents of meltwater and exposing raw, barren land beneath them. An open frontier is emerging. Over the previous several 100,000 years, different groups of ancient humans had occupied Britain during warmer intervals. Neanderthals and later modern humans ventured into the region whenever the climate allowed. Yet each time, the return of glacial conditions forced them south once again. Britain was repeatedly abandoned, erased, and reclaimed by ice. By the time the last glacial maximum finally ended, the land was once again empty, a blank slate, waiting for new inhabitants. For decades, researchers believed the story of Britain's recolonization was relatively simple: a single group of people moving north as the climate improved, settling the land, and gradually adapting their culture as temperatures rose. But this tidy narrative has proven to be wrong. Thanks to the oldest human DNA ever recovered from the British Isles, scientists have completely rewritten what we thought we knew about the first people to return to Britain after the ice retreated. To understand the world they entered, we must imagine Europe at its coldest. Between roughly 26,000 and 19,000 years ago, temperatures plunged to extreme lows. Much of northern Europe became an Arctic desert. Vast ice sheets engulfed Scandinavia and the entirety of Britain, while tundra and wind-scoured steppes stretched across the continent. Human survival was pushed to its limits. Only a handful of southern refuges remained habitable, regions in northern Spain, southern France, and parts of Italy. Here, small bands of hunter-gatherers endured the harsh climate. These communities included cultures such as the Gravettians and other early modern human groups who had arrived in Europe tens of thousands of years earlier and now clung to survival at the edges of the frozen world. Then, around 18,000 years ago, the ice began to collapse in earnest. Glaciers melted in powerful torrents, sea levels rose, and new landscapes emerged from beneath the retreating ice. Into this changing world came the Magdalenian culture, the last great tradition of the Upper Paleolithic. Flourishing across Europe between roughly 17,000 and 12,000 years ago, the Magdalenian people were exceptionally skilled hunters and artisans. They produced finely crafted stone blades, antler harpoons, bone needles, engraved stones, and some of the most extraordinary cave art ever created. By around 16,000 years ago, the ice had fully retreated from Britain. In its place rose an immense landmass now known as Doggerland. Far from a narrow land bridge, Doggerland was a vast and fertile region, an expanse of rivers, lakes, wetlands, and forests. It supported abundant wildlife and acted as a natural corridor for animals and humans moving northward from the European mainland. Across this landscape came the first post-glacial settlers of Britain, arriving around 15,500 years ago. These people are known archaeologically as the Creswellians, Britain's regional expression of the broader Magdalenian tradition. They carried distinctive toolkits made of flint blades and reindeer antler harpoons, adapted to hunting large, cold-adapted animals on open tundra. One of the most important sites associated with these early settlers is Gough's Cave, located in Cheddar Gorge in Somerset, England. Excavations conducted over more than a century uncovered an extraordinary assemblage of artifacts, stone tools, animal bones, and perhaps most unsettling of all, human remains. At least 6 individuals are represented at the site, ranging from a small child around 3 years old to several adults. Their bones bear unmistakable signs of deliberate processing. Skulls were carefully modified into polished skull cups, while cut marks and fracture patterns indicate systematic dismemberment. This was not desperate survival cannibalism. The precision and repetition of the modifications point instead to structured mortuary rituals, acts imbued with symbolic or cultural meaning. Another critical site is Kendrick's Cave in Wales. Here, too, human remains have been recovered, but the story they tell is very different. The bodies at Kendrick's Cave appear to have been carefully buried, accompanied by red ochre and personal ornaments. Rather than evidence of cannibalism, these burials reflect deliberate funerary practices and social identity. The remains from both sites, dating between roughly 15,000 and 13,000 years ago, represent the earliest known post-glacial population of Britain. For decades, that was all archaeologists could say. The bones lay silent, offering only fragments of a much larger story. The deeper truth, who these people really were, where they came from, and how they were related, remained locked inside their cells. For years, extracting DNA from Ice Age Britain was considered nearly impossible. The country's acidic soils rapidly destroy bone, and Paleolithic remains often preserve only tiny, degraded genetic fragments. But advances in ancient DNA technology slowly changed what was possible. Researchers began by using high-resolution carbon dating to confirm the precise ages of the remains. Then, targeting dense skeletal regions, such as the petrous bone of the inner ear, they carefully extracted microscopic traces of DNA. Not every individual yielded usable genetic material, but those that did revealed something extraordinary. One individual, a woman from Gough's Cave who lived around 14,700 years ago, belonged not to the later Western hunter-gatherer population long assumed to dominate early Britain, but to a much older genetic lineage known as Goyet Q2. A lineage, in this context, refers to a population sharing common ancient ancestors. The Goyet Q2 lineage takes its name from Goyet Cave in Belgium, where some of its earliest known representatives were discovered. These people lived across Western and Central Europe between roughly 35,000 and 15,000 years ago and represent some of the earliest modern humans on the continent. Her mitochondrial haplogroup, U8A, was passed down unchanged from mother to child. This lineage is extremely rare today, but during the late Upper Paleolithic, it was widespread across regions such as present-day Belgium, Germany, and France, fitting perfectly with the known distribution of Goyet Q2 populations. But the second individual told a completely different story. A man from Kendrick's Cave in Wales, dated to around 13,500 years ago, carried a mitochondrial lineage known as U5A2. This was one of the earliest branches of a maternal line that would later dominate post-Ice Age Europe. His genome-wide ancestry placed him firmly within the Villa Bruna cluster, also known as Western hunter-gatherers. This population emerged around 14,000 years ago and represented a new genetic wave expanding out of southern European refugia, particularly northern Italy, the Balkans, and surrounding regions, as the climate warmed. In simple terms, the woman from Gough's Cave belonged to a population descended from Europe's earliest Ice Age humans, specialists in cold, open environments. The man from Kendrick's Cave belonged to a younger branch of humanity, adapted to forested landscapes and destined to become the dominant hunter-gatherer population of post-glacial Europe. His burial, accompanied by ochre and decorative objects, reflected cultural traditions very different from the ritual cannibalism seen among the Magdalenian-derived people of Gough's Cave. The implications of this discovery were profound. For the first time, scientists had direct genetic evidence that Britain experienced a complete population turnover between roughly 15,000 and 14,000 years ago. The earlier Magdalenian-derived inhabitants did not gradually evolve into later populations. They disappeared entirely. Within just a few centuries, they were replaced by Western hunter-gatherers migrating across Doggerland.
As the climate warms during the Bowling-Allerod interstitial, Britain transformed from icy steppe into dense woodland. The tundra-based hunting strategies of the Goyet Q2 people were no longer viable. Meanwhile, forest-adapted Western hunter-gatherers thrived, spreading rapidly into newly emerging ecosystems. These findings fundamentally challenged long-standing theories of gradual cultural evolution in early Britain. Instead, ancient DNA reveals a far more dynamic prehistory, one shaped by migration, replacement, and the rise and fall of entirely distinct human lineages. Most importantly, they rewrite the opening chapter of Britain's human story. The very first post-glacial inhabitants were not the ancestors of those who came later. They were the final representatives of a deep Ice Age lineage, a people whose roots stretched back tens of thousands of years and whose presence in Britain was brief, before vanishing forever. As new excavations continue and ancient DNA technology advances, even deeper insights into these forgotten populations await. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment with your thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring.